Attention shoppers. There's a special on sliced bread and chopped liver. 2 for 1. Today only. This offer is exclusively for Club Card members. Happy shopping and have a nice day.
You can find anything you may need in the aisles of these often unpopular places where we purchase our basic necessities. Nevertheless, we need to go to grocery stores in order to keep both our bellies and our fridges full. Oops!
Clean up on aisle 4.
We'll suss out supermarkets on this week's episode of FYI. Welcome to For Your Info.
En inglés.
You got it. Hello, and welcome to another exciting edition of FYI, the topic-based show where we learn about everything and anything under the sun. And who knows what we're going to look at next week? Well, I'll tell you somebody who does, my patrons. But you never know what could come up, especially because I get tons of suggestions from you, my FYIers. So thank you to everybody who has been tuning in to this show since the beginning. The show has been growing constantly. It's also been charting even in Argentina, not just in Spain. So this is great news. And also, we've got some really awesome reviews. So if you haven't reviewed FYI yet, go over to your favorite podcast platform, give it 5 stars, and give us a little write-up. It really helps, and it's just something simple you can do. As we say in English, a little bit goes a long way. And today we're going to some place that seems mundane, but really it's essential. And I'm going to start off by telling you we don't really call them supermarkets in the United States. We call them grocery stores, which I know that's a false friend in Spanish. A groseria is something that's disgusting, if I'm not mistaken. Well, groceries in English is another way of saying things that you can eat, things that are edible. So let's discover grocery stores, supermarkets, whatever you want to call them. And we'll start out like we always do with our intro. I started out by holding my nose. Now, that's the second time I've done that to produce an audio effect. The first time it was in the hospitals episode. If you haven't listened to it, give it a listen. So I held my nose and I said, "Attention shoppers." I mean, that's something you'll always hear no matter where you go. And be careful with the pronunciation. Shop versus chop. Chop es picar. Think about the sound it makes when you're chopping onions. So you got to make sure you're shushing somebody. Shh, shoppers. And maybe today we've got some shopaholics among us. Although let's distinguish something here. We've got grocery shopping, and then we've got shopping for gifts, for clothes, and I feel like one of them is more of a necessary evil. And the one, of course, is grocery shopping. Why? Because we need to eat. And I don't know too many people who grow their own fruits and vegetables or have their own cows on their property. So as I said before, they are essential. So I said, attention shoppers, there's a special on sliced bread and chopped liver. Now, I don't know if you caught this, but I use those 2 items on purpose. And the reason why is they're both idiomatic expressions in English. And in the bonus part, we're going to take a look at a lot of idiomatic expressions, fun facts, and so much more. And if you want to join us every week in the bonus episode, all you have to do is go over to patreon.com/Alberto Alonso and you can join our curious community. We are growing not just in numbers, but I believe we are all enriched. Even myself, as a teacher, I really look forward to our weekly classes. I look forward to my private classes with my interstellar students, and I'm proud of each and every one of you. And if you guys want that special attention, or if you just need a little more, Like you just can't get enough of FYI, well, find out what you're missing out on over on patreon.com/Alberto Alonso. You can talk to any of my patrons and they'll tell you that it's definitely worth it. And speaking of my patrons, I'd like to send a shout out to each and every one of you, especially my super duper students, Lina, Javier, Paco, Roberto, Jose Maria, Mila, and Alex. And don't forget about my interstellar students, Carmen, Isa, Paco, David, and Edgar. Keep up the wonderful work, guys. I'm extremely proud of you, and you should be proud of yourselves. If you want to join us, find out more at patreon.com/Alberto Alonso. Now let's get back to our intro. Did you get the sliced bread and chopped liver thing? Well, the first expression is, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Now, I don't know why that's such an important invention, but I guess it is. And don't forget, we have an episode on bread as well, where I even tell you about my family's bakery, their Sicilian bakery, Minardi's. But the greatest thing since sliced bread is an amazing invention, something that has made everybody's life easier. So I guess you could say FYI is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And what are you going to put on that bread? Well, maybe some chopped liver. And we just looked at the word chop, but the expression chopped liver, hígado picado, means that you're unimportant. So let me give you an example. You give everybody a slice of pizza, and I don't get one. And then I say to you, wait a second. What am I, chopped liver? And you've got to say it with that intonation. What am I, chopped liver? No cuento aquí? I'm not important? I think in Spanish you say, que soy el último mono. So those are just two idiomatic expressions, but we'll look at many more throughout the show and even in the bonus part. Then I said 2 for 1. Today only. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then I said this offer is exclusively for Club Card members. And you know these, a lot of supermarkets or grocery stores these days have their Club Cards. And by the way, I'm a member of all of them. And I'll tell you about that in the bonus part, how my wife calls me grandma. But hey, I love bargain shopping for deals, buscando ofertas. I mean, just last week, I got Pantene Pro V shampoo for free. Well, I had to spend 50 euros, but nowadays, if you buy 3 things, you've already spent 50 euros, sadly. But it can't hurt to be in the club. But I'll tell you more about my shopping habits later, or shall I say my rituals. And then I said, happy shopping and have a nice day. Then I went on to say, you can find anything you may need in the aisles. Let's say that word. The aisle es el pasillo. And you can use the aisle in an airplane. You can use the aisle in a theater. They're all called aisles, but also in a supermarket. And here's a little trick. It sounds exactly like the contraction of I will. So if somebody asks you next time you board a plane, would you like a window seat or an aisle seat? You say, I'll have an aisle seat, please. Hey, it's a good way to remember it. And then I called them unpopular places. Yes, they're essential, but who likes going there? Well, some people, but most people see it as a necessary evil. After a long day of work, the last thing you want to do is go walk around a supermarket for 45 minutes and wait online and whatever else to fill up your gas tank. You don't want to run errands. You want to go home and chill out on your couch with your family or go for a nature walk or whatever it is you do when you have some downtime. But we don't want to be in supermarkets longer than we have to, in general. But we purchase our basic necessities. Then I said, nevertheless, which you can say nevertheless or nonetheless. We need to go to grocery stores in order to keep our bellies and fridges full. And your belly or your tummy is another way of saying your stomach. A cute way of saying your stomach. And obviously, you can say refrigerator or fridge. And obviously, this was a very important invention that changed this whole industry forever. But we'll talk about those milestones and those inventions that made the supermarkets possible that we have today, these mega supermarkets. And then you heard me say, oops, because I dropped something. I got to admit, I'm a bit clumsy. And it wouldn't be the first time I dropped something in a supermarket aisle. But we have a joke that we say when somebody drops something, a glass, or they spill a drink or something like that, and we say, clean up on aisle 4. Clean up on aisle 4. And the reason we say that is because at the supermarket, when something broke, you would hear that over the loudspeaker. You would hear them say, clean up on aisle 7. So now we do that. When somebody drops something, it's as old as time itself, at least in the area where I grew up. And it's something we heard from an early age, because a lot of times, especially when we were really young, we would go with our parents to go grocery shopping. And I think it's a great activity to do together, not just because I teach my daughter hundreds of words when we go to the supermarket, but also because we make good choices together. And then I wrapped up the intro saying, we'll suss out supermarkets. And to suss out is to explore. So what is a supermarket? Well, let's define it. A supermarket is a self-service shop offering a wide variety of food, beverages, and household products, organized into sections. This kind of store is larger and has a wider selection than earlier grocery stores, but is smaller and more limited in the range of merchandise than a hypermarket or a big box market. In everyday U.S. usage, however, grocery store is often used to mean supermarket. So the terms are interchangeable. And as we just said, they're self-service now. They weren't always self-service. This was just one of the many milestones. But what was the world like without these supermarkets, where you could get everything you want under one roof? Well, all you have to do is think about grandma. At least in my case, my abuela mama, I called her Maria Lilia. When I used to come to Almeria in the summers, she wouldn't get the fish at the same place as the meat or the same place as the bread. You get the fish at the fishmonger, and you get the meat at the butcher shop. And you get the bread or the pastries from the bakery. You get fresh produce. Produce is fruits and vegetables. You get fresh produce from the greengrocer or a fruit stand. My point is, you would go to each place for each specific thing. And that was great when everybody had all the time in the world. And I remember my grandma. She would take all morning just to buy 7 things. Now, the food was delicious that she made, but it was quite time-consuming. And now, as we know, in many households, everybody's working. So who has time to spend the whole morning going from shop to shop? We're all running around like headless chickens. We're in a hurry. We're going to be late to our own funerals, as my mother says. And we can't afford, time-wise, to go to 7 different stores. So there's an emphasis on convenience and speed. But I used to love going with my grandma to the butchers, then to the bakers. At first, I didn't understand it, because ever since I could remember in the United States, we got everything at the same place. And I must say, that's a beautiful thing about Europe. You still have butcher shops. You still have markets all over Madrid and all over Spain where you can go to each individual stand and you can really get your fish from the fish guy. The guy who knows fish. It's his thing. You can ask him a million questions. Nobody knows more about fish than him. And you would ask about his family, and he would ask about your kids. I mean, it was a very social thing as well. I remember my grandma stopping to talk to 50 million people along the way. And that was cool. That was part of it. There was no rush. But now, I gotta get to work. I gotta drop my kids off. I gotta pick them up. Soccer practice. It is crazy with our busy schedules these days. And as much as we all love to be chatty Cathys and gossip and chat with our friends when we come across them on the street, we don't really have that much time. We want to get the groceries we need on our list, Go in, get out of there, go home, put it away, and forget about it. It's much less of an experience these days. And let's face it, I mean, if you want to sum it all up into one sentence, the average shopper these days prefers to spend more time in one trip rather than making several small trips. So you don't want to go buy bread, then, the next day I'm going to go buy some fruit. No, you want to buy it all the same day and save on trips. But that wasn't the way it was back then. You wouldn't even think of getting your fish at the same place you got your vegetables, or at least from the same person. And then in 1915, a guy named Vincent Astor streamlined this idea. And to streamline is to make it aerodynamic, so to speak. And he came up with something in New York City called the Astor Market. And he put everything all under one roof. It was a way to cut costs, because people didn't have to move anywhere, so it would save time and money. And it was an open air market. When I read about it, it kind of reminded me of the Spanish markets. And they sold meat, fruit, produce, and flowers. And if you go to Mercado de San Miguel today, that's what they sell. Plus oysters and sushi. Okay, we've modernized quite a bit. But the idea was to make it easy. And obviously, the more people purchased, the better. And he based it on the economy of scale. But it did not work. People resisted. And in 1917, just 2 years later, the market folded. This is another way of saying to shut down. But his idea didn't work at that time. Now, we see that that's the general idea that all supermarkets or even open-air markets share. Kind of a cooperative, everybody working together, sharing the space, taking care of the space. And Europe now, even though the United States led the way in supermarkets and grocery stores, Europe is leading the way on these co-op supermarkets. And this is where it's just a group of people who all chip in to get better prices, better products. As we say in English, it's power in numbers. Then in 1916, there was a guy named Clarence Saunders, and he opened something that is still in existence today. It's called the Piggly Wiggly. You gotta love the name. Piggly Wiggly. Well, piggly, you know what it is, a pig, and to wiggle is to move around. So it's got a very catchy name, and it opened in Memphis, Tennessee. Now they're all over the United States. But this was different. Why? This was the first time we saw self-service. So at a Piggly Wiggly, you wouldn't have to wait for a store clerk to get something down off the shelf for you, or to hand you the tomatoes. You could get them yourself, and you could walk around and browse. If they were lucky, you would buy things that you didn't intend to buy. So it was brilliant, to say the least. And also, he didn't have to hire as many people, because now the shoppers were doing all the work. Sir, could you pass me that can of stewed tomatoes? Oh no, grab it yourself, ma'am. Please, feel free. So the people working at the supermarket could spend their time doing other things, cleaning up the store, restocking the shelves. They didn't have to spend as much time dealing with the customers. And he was a pioneer in many other ways, including franchises. So as with everything we've looked at on FYI, it's a series of different things that come together to make the modern day thing we have today. And the industry, like many, had to overcome many hurdles. A hurdle is like a limitation. And more, when people started working, well, they had less time to spend at the supermarket or going to different stores. So that was a big cultural shift too. People couldn't afford to spend all morning there. Other things that made the industry grow, obviously refrigeration. The invention of freezers in 1857. Now you could buy more things and you could stock up on things for the winter. Things wouldn't go bad as quickly. I mean, this was a major turning point in many industries, not just in food service and distribution. In the 1920s, the car was a huge thing, because think about it. You can only buy as much as you can carry. Well, what's the problem? You usually went there on foot. Yeah, you would usually walk there. Did you hear me talk about a car when I talked about my grandma? No, you walked from place to place. You did your little route, but you could only carry what you could carry. So you were limited, and the money they could make was limited as well. But now, if people had cars, well, they could bring their cars and fill up their cars. And you didn't have to go to the store as many times. And you didn't have to carry as much or do as many trips. And of course, with the invention of the car, what they realized was they had to put parking lots or parking garages. Because if people could come there and park for free, then they could fill up that car. And it worked. They made these huge supermarkets with parking lots, plenty of parking for everybody. And parking was free, and a lot of them advertised that too. Like, okay, we know it's a little further than the center of the city, but you can park for free. And you know what was an even more influential invention in this world than the car? The shopping cart. That's right, and it came after. The car, the automobile, was invented before the shopping cart. The shopping cart came out in 1937, a guy named Goldman, and people hated it. Men said, I'm not going to push a cart around. That's not manly. And women said, okay, I'll push my daughter around in a stroller, but I'm not going to be walking lettuce and bread around. So it wasn't accepted at first. But again, that was another huge invention. Because now you could bring everything on wheels. And if you've noticed, how big are shopping carts these days? They have gotten exponentially bigger throughout the years. Sure, it's a big business. And we're going to talk a lot about the business side of it in the bonus episode today. Other huge breakthroughs were the rewards clubs, barcodes, computers, and of course, microwaves in the 1970s, because now they could have prepared food for all of these workers with their busy schedules. So all of these things contributed to the growth of the supermarkets and their popularity, of course. So where did it all start? What was the first supermarket? Well, there are many claims, as you can imagine, but they say it's King Cullen. It is the closest thing to the modern-day supermarket, and it had many firsts that we still have today. And there was a big debate. They even got the Smithsonian Institution involved, and they tried to define what the attributes of a supermarket were. And they said, and I quote, self-service, separate product departments, discount pricing, marketing, and volume selling. And according to that definition, the first true supermarket in the United States was opened by a guy named Michael J. Cullen. The store was called King Cullen. I believe they still have some in New York, if I'm not mistaken. The name rings a bell. Well, this was August 4th, 1930. It was in a former garage in Jamaica. No, not Jamaica the island, Jamaica, Queens in New York City. And their motto, their slogan was, pile it high, sell it cheap. So they would buy things in bulk and be able to sell it cheaper than the smaller stores. Again, discount pricing was part of their definition. Another thing was the prices were clearly marked. Before that, you didn't really see the prices. Now I think it's a law. You have to clearly mark the prices. Well, at the time of Michael J. Cullen's death in 1936, there were 17 King Cullen stores in operation. And his legacy was bringing the world self-service, uniform stores where each one was like the next, nationwide marketing, so they started marketing and trying to get people in the doors as well, and then separating the different departments, as well as large volumes of food, as we said, where they could give a better price, and the parking lot, which was key. So King Cullen is the king. And then many others followed suit, such as Safeway, Kroger, and now you've got the king of kings, Walmart. And they have groceries, they have clothes, they have a perfume department, whatever you can think of. And obviously, Walmart is quite controversial. They're putting many mom and pop shops out of business. Some American towns have voted against putting a Walmart in there. Yes, it's convenient, but at what cost? as we ask ourselves in every episode. In the Amazon episode, we said, what cost does this convenience have? So the undisputed champion is definitely Walmart, and they're so much more than just a supermarket. They have double the annual income of Kroger, who used to be the leading supermarket chain. At the time of the recording of this podcast, they have 4,735 locations. That means almost 7.5% of all grocery stores in the United States are Walmarts. And as with any industry, you've seen a lot of merging. Many companies have not weathered the storms of recession and other unforeseen circumstances that may come up. A famous one that I remember being the king of kings was one called A&P. The full name was the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, and it was established as far back as 1859. It was a chain that you could find in Canada and the United States, and it was everywhere. And now it doesn't exist anymore. After 2 bankruptcies, A&P finally closed its doors in 2015. So even giants can fall. And in the United States, all these things were happening. People were moving out to the suburbs, so grocery stores were becoming the next big thing. But Europe lagged behind. Now you can find these mega supermarkets here in Europe, and there are some really good chains here in Europe. But if you look at the timelines of the two, they're very, very different. As I said, when I used to come to Almeria 25 years ago, and even now, you can still go and get your fish at the fishmongers, your meat at the butchers. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't want that to stop. Yes, I'm all for convenience. Who isn't? But I don't want those mom and pop shops to disappear. These people are specialists. They could tell you every single part of a cow or a chicken. And now it's just some teenage kid who, he scans the barcode and he says, no, this is the actual price. So you can say Europe lagged behind, or Europe is still holding on to getting things at their designated place, which I think is absolutely beautiful. I think it's great to have both. To have a mega supermarket where you can pick up everything and anything you need, but also to be able to go over to the corner butchers and look him in the eye and know his children's names. That's awesome. And that should never change. I'm saying that to you guys, many of my listeners in Spain, because in the United States, in general, those days are done. Everything is mega centers with ultra-processed food. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about the dark side as well in the bonus episode. But let me give you a fun fact before we get going. Grocery stores can have over 39,500 different items on average. They have stuff you didn't even know you needed, or stuff that maybe you didn't need but you bought anyway. Well, I hope you enjoyed our little foray into supermarkets, and I sure hope you'll join us in the bonus episode of today's FYI.